Time now for Eye on Africa, the headlines. Burundi votes for constitutional change in a referendum. All of this potentially opening the way for Pierre Nkurunziza to further extend his rule. Elsewhere, a major vaccination programme rolled out in the DRC in a bid to tackle the deadly Ebola outbreak there. And NGOs demand justice for a Sudanese woman facing the death penalty for killing the husband she says tried to rape her. We start in Burundi, where election officials say voters have backed constitutional reforms that could leave President Pierre Nkurunziza in power until 2034. And after a referendum that the opposition decried as undemocratic, Nkurunziza's controversial decision to stand for re-election back in 2015 sparked an attempted coup and a crackdown in which at least 1,200 people lost their lives. For more, I'm joined from Nairobi by Gina Moore, who's East Africa Bureau Chief for the New York Times and recently returned from reporting in Burundi. Thanks very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about the circumstances of this referendum.
So the referendum was interesting from a couple of perspectives. It was, for a lot of people, there was an unexpectedly strong campaign against the changes in the Constitution. And while everyone knew that there would be people in Burundi who did not support changing the Constitution, quite a number of observers were surprised that the coalition of opposition politicians and their supporters were allowed to campaign as openly as they did. Now, those folks would say as well that they faced some harassment and some difficulties while they were doing the campaign, but there were rallies. They received airtime on state television, other sort of indications of notable, a degree of openness in the political dialogue, which I think probably surprised some observers. And I say that it surprised some observers in part because there are also reports of a lot of repression and abuses in the registration campaign that led up to the referendum. So the voter registration campaign, which was not only for voters to vote in this referendum, but also to vote in coming elections, including the 2020 presidential election. And there was a lot of pressure, some of it allegedly backed by state violence, according to Human Rights Watch, to make sure that a vast number of the population was, in fact, registered to vote. And that becomes an issue, of course, when you think about the number of people who turned out in order to cast votes in the referendum.
You're talking there about 2020. Are we expecting many more years in office, potentially, for Pierre Nkurunziza?
So the new constitution potentially paves the way for him to ask for 2 more terms. It's not clear. He's not said that he's not going to run. His party supporters and party leaders make clear that he has not said that he's going to run. But he used an electoral technicality to claim a chance at what is considered a 3rd term in 2015, and he's widely believed to be expected to use the new constitution as a reason to claim a chance at 2 more mandates. The interesting bonus for him from that perspective in the new constitution is that the presidential mandates become 7 terms long, not 7 years long, not 5 years. So he could serve longer, and if he sits just one term out on the bench, he, like any other Burundian president, gets to run again.
Gina Moore, thanks very much for joining us. To the Democratic Republic of Congo next, where a vaccination programme has been launched in a bid to halt the spread of Ebola. These 26 people are thought to have been killed in the latest outbreak of the deadly virus. Conditions in the DRC mean the immunisation campaign is fraught with difficulties. But the World Health Organization does say preparedness has significantly improved since the Ebola epidemic, which struck West Africa in 2014. Erin Ogunkei and Emerald Maxwell report.
International health workers are working to prevent one of the world's deadliest viruses from spreading to one of the African continent's most populous cities. 4,000 doses of an experimental vaccine have been sent to Mbandaka, the Democratic Republic of Congo's first urban area to register cases in the current outbreak. Health experts worry the virus could spread to the country's capital, Kinshasa, which is just 700 kilometers away. Despite the risk of spread, the World Health Organization has decided not to declare an international public health emergency.
The IHR Emergency Committee met on Friday and advised me not to declare a public health emergency of international concern, although they noted that the situation remains very serious. It's concerning that we now have cases of Ebola in an urban center, but we're much better placed to deal with this outbreak than we were in 2014.
11,300 people died during the last Ebola outbreak between 2014 and 2016. To contain the disease this time around, donors have promised 300,000 doses of the vaccine, with the first wave to be given to healthcare professionals. The government is following all confirmed cases and has put in surveillance measures at Mbandaka's entrance and exit points. But some residents say they don't know how to face the outbreak.
We work on this river every day. We go to villages all over to get clients. We really know nothing at all about this Ebola epidemic over here.
I don't know how to protect myself against Ebola. Only God can protect me from this illness.
The virus spreads through direct contact with body fluids from an infected person. It causes hemorrhagic fever, which attacks the organs and affects the body's ability to regulate itself. More than 40 cases have been reported, and some 24 people have died in the DRC since early April.
Well, this weekend saw protesters blocked in Nairobi as they demanded justice for a woman whose case has come to highlight issues of forced marriage and marital rape in Sudan. Noura Hussein's in jail there, potentially facing death by hanging for fatally stabbing the husband she said tried to rape her. Noura Hussein claims she was tricked into marriage at age 16 by her family. For more, I'm joined from the Kenyan capital by Naitore Nyamu, who's a lawyer with Equality Now, one of the NGOs campaigning on Hussein's behalf. Thanks very much for talking to us. Tell us a little bit more about how exactly this verdict was reached in Sudan.
Absolutely. So the court based itself on the evidence that was tabled in court, and based on the laws that are currently in operation in Sudan, that's what they based to come up to this verdict. However, there are issues that the court did not look at. First of all, being that Noura was acting in self-defense. Secondly, the fact that Noura was raped, and also the fact that Noura also was, forced into marriage despite having resisted this marriage. So these are some of the grounds that will form the basis of the appeal.
And how common are some of the elements of Noura Hussein's case?
Equality Now has been working with a couple of our partners who work in Sudan, and they've informed us, rightfully so, that there are a number of other similar cases like Noura's case, whereby young girls are forced into marriage, and then others are even raped. And the cases of marital rape are quite rampant in Sudan. What needs to be done is to have a law that explicitly outlaws marital rape. That's one of the things that Equality Now is working on in terms of its advocacy campaign.
And what about what about where Noura Hussein stands now? She's legally in quite a precarious time.
Exactly. Since the court's verdict on 10th of May, the verdict stands, but we have 15 days to appeal, and the lawyers on the ground are working to ensure that an appeal is made before the expiry of those dates. And based on some of the research and the work that the lawyers have been doing, I believe they'll come up with very solid grounds for appeal. And this will see all these charges against Noura dropped. Because what we are emphasizing is that Noura is a victim. She's not a criminal. In the first place, she should not be facing these charges. And that's why in all our advocacy campaigns, we are urging the government of Sudan and the president to drop all the criminal charges against Noura. Noura is a victim.
Naitore Nyamu, thanks very much for joining us. Zimbabwe's new leadership has applied to rejoin the Commonwealth. The country withdrew from the organisation in 2003 after seeing its membership suspended over alleged election rigging. Former Zimbabwean leader Robert Mugabe rejected attempts to bring Zimbabwe back into the fray. His decades-long rule came to an end in November when he was replaced by Emerson Mnangagwa. These 20 people are reported dead after a cyclone brought strong winds and flooding to the Horn of Africa. The majority of the deaths coming in the breakaway state of Somaliland in northern Somalia. The UN's humanitarian office says the full extent of the damage there remains unclear after the storm destroyed roads and communications infrastructure. 2 people also killed in Djibouti, where several neighbourhoods of the capital were flooded. Nigerian culture taking centre stage in Paris this weekend. That is the Nigerian Creative Arts Exchange set up at the Pavillon Dauphine Saint-Clair. The country's ambassador, it's about raising appreciation and boosting his country's profile here in France.
I think that there's a lot of business opportunity between the two. I'm choosing to focus on culture-related products, because France is known for being the house and the country for beauty products, for fashion products, for food. And so I think there's a lot of synergy opportunities there. They'll be able to find people who are interested from Nigeria and people who are interested from France.
That's it for Eye on Africa. Do stay with us here on France 24.